Good morning, honor students. I just wanted to kind of set up section 4 for you and also preview the questions that you should be thinking about and getting ready to discuss on Wednesday. Remember that I'll make a copy for everyone's of these so that if you'd like to type into that, you may, but you don't have to. But just be ready to discuss these. So one of the things that's going to come up, especially in the last chapter, The Lives of the Dead, is this idea that his novel is equal parts love and war story. That came up towards the beginning of the novel in the second chapter when Jimmy Cross and Tim are talking, and it's called Love. And O'Brien brings up this idea even a little later on, about halfway through the book, but it wasn't a war story, it was a love story. So this is one of those motifs that's carried through the novel. And he's going to end his novel full circle with this idea too. So I want you to think about how that can be true. This novel that was so gruesome at times and so some parts so difficult to stomach, that we would say those are the parts that are the traditional war story. But how is this also a love story? Notice that it's asking you to defend this statement. So think about how that can be true. Now, in the last chapter, moving on to question 2, in The Lives of the Dead, O'Brien starts this chapter by talking about Vietnam, and actually one of his first experiences in Vietnam. He'd only been there a few days. It's his 4th day, I think he says. And he's shocked by the way that the other soldiers treat this dead body that they find in this village. And then he transitions to a childhood memory he has of this girl who he calls Linda. And she has a brain tumor, cancer. And he talks about the impact that her death had on him. And so I just want you to, as you read that last chapter, think about why did he include this story about this 9-year-old girl in his childhood? Nothing to do with the war or with Vietnam. But how does it fit into the other sections of the book? Can you connect this story about Linda to other characters, other people that he saw die, perhaps, other experiences or feelings he had in the war that are similar? So that's question 2. The first chapter of the section is called Field Trip. And O'Brien, or the narrator, brings his daughter, Kathleen. Disclosure, O'Brien does have I believe he has a daughter, but I don't think her name is Kathleen, and it's likely that the story is made up. As we've talked about, this is a work of fiction. But in this chapter, Field Trip, O'Brien / narrator goes to the field where Kiowa died with his daughter, and they both have very different reactions. As you saw, if you watched my agenda, there was that quiz question that I should not have put in there because it was referring to this chapter. The answer to that is that when O'Brien sees this field again, years later, he feels swallowed up by it, almost as if he's still stuck in it, and he has a hard time feeling emotions. Now, his daughter, who comes with him, is young. She's 10. And her reaction to it is very different. So I want you to pay attention to how she reacts to her father bringing her to this random field in the middle of nowhere in Vietnam, and think about what her reaction could represent. What could it symbolize, in other words? So maybe think about people at home, people who haven't experienced war, kind of go in that direction. Nightlife is the second to last chapter. You are allowed to skip Ghost Soldiers, and in Ghost Soldiers, you find out at the beginning of the chapter that Rat Kiley, who is the medic that O'Brien has referred to up to this point, left before the field incident. He went to Japan. You don't find out why. And they got a new medic who, because of his ineptitude and inexperience, O'Brien almost dies. Like I said, if you have time, read that chapter 2, The Ghost Soldiers. But in Nightlife, you find out why Rat Kiley was sent off to Japan. And you'll see that he is definitely carrying something through that chapter. So be ready to talk about that. And then think about, what is Tim O'Brien, or a narrator, carrying into and through the last chapter, The Lives of the Dead? What does he feel responsible for? What is he still carrying after Vietnam? How does this story about Linda from his childhood relate to Vietnam? Kind of tying back to question 2. 6, this will be, I think, a fun question to ask. I want you to look back at the novel as a whole. 6 and 7 are really novel as a whole. Which chapter do you think was the most powerful, and why? If you had to pick one that you think really encapsulates the themes of this book, or the one that hit you the hardest, pick one. Be ready to say why you think that. And then finally, number 7, what do you think was O'Brien's purpose in writing this novel? And when you answer that question, I want you to think about the fact, remember that this is a work of metafiction, which we've talked about, which I've mentioned, that there are times when O'Brien steps back from the narrator role and lets us know that he's writing, that this is a work of fiction. He talks about the process of writing. How does that fit into his purpose? And just what do you think he wanted his readers to take away from reading this book? If you could distill that into a sentence or two. What is his purpose in writing this novel? What does he want the readers to understand? So that should give you a good preview to start reading the end of the book. Again, I'll say it one more time. You do not need to type out answers to any of these and turn them in, although I will make a copy of this for everybody so that if you'd like to jot down notes on this document, you're free to do so. And we'll discuss these via a Google Hangout with the chat bar, where you'll be typing in your responses on Wednesday. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a good day.